Hi folks, welcome to the podcast of the Load Seaters for the 6th of October 2021. I'm joined by a new presenter that we have, Thomas.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Right, so before we get started, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm of course Thomas. I'm currently completing a PhD in German idealism and critical theory at the University of York, Department of Philosophy, now part-time because I've taken this position. Admittedly, I have a rather unique political history, having been the leader of the UK Independence Party Ashford Youth Whig in 2013. I did an appalling job of it, but nonetheless, it's a title.
Yeah.
I campaigned for Brexit with Vote Leave in 2016, and in the same year, I converted to Marxist Leninism. So yeah, I was an actual Bolshevik at some point in my intellectual life.
And what would you consider yourself now?
Not that. But in recent years, I've evolved more into a scholar of Hegel, who, combined with some elements of Marxist critique, which I think have some value, has allowed me to develop a rather unique way of conceptualising wokeness in a way that present Marxists don't like very much. So my disdain for synthetic progressivism, in essence, is what has brought me here. And yeah, I'm just delighted to be getting started.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be speaking about things that are a bit more easy to understand than all of that. Yeah, so, I mean, what would you describe yourself as politically now, if you had to put a label on yourself?
If I had to put a label on myself, I'm probably more in the blue Labour camp.
Right.
In that I find it quite hard to subscribe to fiscally conservative values, given that I still have a lot of strong opinions about, for example, the financial crisis of 2008, which was... I would almost feel like I have to align myself with that class, really, if I'm to be a fiscal conservative. And I can't really say that Thatcherism has done all that much for conservatism itself in the long run, unfortunately. But I'm definitely socially conservative insofar as I see a lot of things that are currently under attack as things that deserve to be preserved in some way, or at least play an important part in continuing to advance things in the right way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess you could say that I'm still kind of aligned with the old left, but that the left doesn't want me for that reason anymore. Yeah, and there's more I suppose potential for rational discourse here.
I think that Scruton's critiques of Thatcher and sort of neoconservatism, neoliberalism, are perfectly lucid, though. From both like a traditional conservative and a traditional Labour perspective.
Yeah,
they mesh up, I think, quite well. But we'll talk about it another time because we're not going to go off on a tangent. But we'll talk about all this anyway. So today we're going to be talking about why the establishment is attacking Facebook. Now I know Callum talked about this yesterday, but there's more that's come around, and I think that there's a little bit more to dig up out of this, which I think is interesting. Why football isn't full of racists, and of course how the Conservatives are being subverted by the left at their own party conference, because of course they are. But before we start, there's some new things on the website, such as a video I did at the live event called The Universal Human. Now this, I think, is actually one of the most important things that I've done. I wasn't going to do this at the live event, but I kind of wrote it in the car on the way down, because suddenly like the stars aligned and I could see like all of these things had come into alignment. I was like, oh, right, I can trace a line through all of this to essentially establish why the globalists are as they are and why they're doing what they're doing and why we aren't like them. I'm not going to spoil it. It's free on the website. You can go watch it. Callum has put up day 5 is edit of day 5 of the Labour conference abridged. So thankfully for him, he doesn't have to now watch the endless nonsense coming out of the Labour Party. But of course, if you have a friend who is thinking about voting for Labour, ask them why they're voting for this, send them this, ask them why this, what is it about this that appeals to you so much. The next one is an article that Hugo did that Callum wants to promote, that was published on 13th of September, called The Tories and the NHS, probably because of the way the Conservative Party conference is going. And this is now, now this has audio available. So what we're doing is for the silver members, they can get access to an audio track of the articles, so they can listen to it rather than having to read it. And we're going back through the older articles as time goes on. So this is a new audio track available on that, so you can find that in the show notes. And of course, if you want to sign up and support us, you can check out our Epoch or the Contemplations. This last one was talking about the Battle of Cressy. I happen to be a particular fan of this era because it's fun. Not for the French, but that's their problem. But we've got the Battle of Poitiers that we recorded yesterday, and the Battle of Agincourt that'll be coming the week after this one. So it's a very good series of podcasts talking about what was going on in the 100 Years' War. But anyway, let's get into it. So, why is the establishment attacking Facebook? Because from a sort of normal reading of the politics of Silicon Valley, people would think, well, Mark Zuckerberg is one of these leftist social media barons in Silicon Valley. He's part of the cartel. He's in the club, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is the nature of Facebook itself, and incidentally, Zuckerberg's commitment to free expression. Now, I realize there are going to be a bunch of people hearing that going, wait a minute. So, I know. Give me a minute. We'll get to it. So let's talk about the whistleblower. The whistleblower, whose name was Frances Haugen, who was a former Facebook product manager who worked on civic integrity issues, did a 60 Minutes interview where she pointed out, as we covered earlier this week in the podcast, that there are bad things to Facebook and Instagram, and leaked these to the Wall Street Journal. These were part of a sort of combined arms attack on Facebook because of Facebook's dominance. One of the points that they bring up over and over again is just how dominant in the social media market Facebook is, because if we don't consider YouTube to be a social media platform, which I don't think it is in the traditional sense, Facebook is by far the biggest, and probably is bigger than all of the others combined. And so they don't like this, because what that means is if you have 3 billion users, well, there's a fairly good chance that some of them will be right-wing. That's bad. Right-wingers need to be stopped. So basically, she's complaining that we have evidence from a variety of sources that hate speech, divisive political speech, and misinformation on Facebook and the family of apps are affecting societies around the world. It's like, well, sure. I mean, any amount of communication affects societies. That's the point of communication. Why would we talk if it wasn't going to have an effect?
Quite.
But anyway, moving on, she started at Facebook in 2019 after previously working for other tech giants like Google, Pinterest, and Yelp. And she had a testimony before a Senate subcommittee on consumer protection, product safety, and data security yesterday. And that makes me suspicious. That gets the old almonds activated. Is she a plant? I mean, I don't know. But do I think that the internal politics of Silicon Valley are going to be ruthless because of the amount of money and influence involved? Of course I do. And you'd be a fool not to, in my opinion. But she said that she believes that Mark Zuckerberg never set out to make a hateful platform, because that's how Facebook is in this characterization. It's just hateful. I mean, most people are on there sharing pictures of their grandmothers, but no, it's a hateful platform. And that kind of pathologizing is important, because otherwise we don't have the narrative justification in order to take action against Facebook. But he has allowed choices to be made where the side effects of those choices are hateful, that hateful and polarizing content gets more distribution and more reach. So she had her Senate hearing, which was very interesting and reported well by TechCrunch. They say throughout the hearing, she makes it clear that she thinks Facebook's current algorithm, which rewards posts that generate meaningful social interactions, is dangerous. This was rolled out in 2018, with the newsfeed algorithm prioritizes interactions such as comments and likes from the people who Facebook thinks you're closest to, like friends and family. But she claims that the leaked documents show that this system yields unhealthy side effects on important slices of public content, such as politics and news. Obviously, this is all framed in the, it's right-wing misinformation, as if there isn't plenty of left-wing misinformation as well. But because Facebook isn't a one-sided, left-wing dominated platform, this means that it's a right-wing platform in their view. But we'll get to that in a minute. So she has some good suggestions. She points out that Facebook uses this user-based engagement ranking in which AI displays the content that it thinks will be most interesting to individual users. This means that content that elicits stronger reactions from users will be prioritized, boosting misinformation, toxicity, and violent content. And she thinks that, in fact, a chronological ranking would help mitigate these negative impacts. Now, I just want to be clear, all I've ever wanted from social media sites is just show me in chronological order that which I am subscribed to. I mean, it's not really much to ask for, is it?
No, not really.
No, but this kind of prioritizing of reactive content, again, not a right-wing thing particularly, a left-wing thing as well, is part of their attempt to increase your user engagement with the site, because in their interest they want to keep you on the site for as long as possible because it's their business, but it's not necessarily your business. It's not a bad suggestion on her part, but she had this 60 Minutes interview, and this has been well covered by the press, and that's something to make me suspicious, because there are lots of other whistleblowers who have come from within Facebook, and you may have seen them on Project Veritas, and they don't get 60 Minutes interviews. They don't get all this positive coverage. And so the fact that she does makes me very, very suspicious. But anyway, she says that after the 2020 election, or leading up to it, in fact, they had a Civic Integrity Committee in Facebook, which was dissolved after the 2020 election. So you can see that there they are engaging in what I guess you could call some sort of election manipulation or information manipulation regarding the election. And they implemented these safeguards to reduce misinformation, quote unquote, before the election, but after the election they turned off these safeguards, of course, to encourage user interaction. She thinks that is, quote, deeply problematic. She says, the thing I'm asking for is a move away from short-termism, which is what Facebook is run under today. It's being led by metrics and not people. With appropriate oversights and some of these constraints, it is possible that Facebook could actually be a much more profitable company 5 or 10 years down the road. If it wasn't so toxic, people wouldn't quit it. I think that's rather ironic, given that literally half the planet uses Facebook. So it doesn't really have a problem with people quitting Facebook. And I don't think that Facebook is nearly as toxic as perhaps some of the alternatives, like Twitter. But that's not the issue here, because the issue is that this is being used as a method to try and gain control of information distribution on Facebook. Now, that's not good if you are a person who thinks that you should be the one in charge of the information you distribute and how it gets distributed, because it's a social media platform, not a publisher. Anyway, so she wants Facebook run like Twitter, put in summary, and she even suggests that they have soft interventions like they do on Twitter and various other things, and they do have these on Facebook. You know, if you post something about COVID, they'll put up a little panel that says, you know, click here for COVID information, blah, blah, from our verified fact checkers. And what's interesting about this is she doesn't want Facebook broken up. She doesn't want Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp broken up, because that would reduce the influence of people who wish to reform these companies. And so what she's looking for is control over these companies. And the press loved it. If we can get to the next one, John. Independent here posting, you can see it. Facebook whistleblower, Huygen called 21st century hero by Senate as Zuckerberg told toxic time is up. So Zuckerberg, evil toxic. This woman, 21st century hero. Okay. I'm not a big fan of having to defend Zuckerberg, but unfortunately, that's going to be something we're going to have to talk about. This, of course, caused Facebook's stock to plummet, and Zuckerberg lost billions of dollars in value. But anyway, moving on. Bloomberg. Again, you've got to see how the press is reporting this. Left Mark Zuckerberg speechless. He wasn't at the hearing, so I mean, he didn't get a chance to respond. But anyway, the Bloomberg article informs us that she is someone who has an MBA from Harvard and is well versed in these algorithms, so she can't just be discredited. It's like, right, okay. But why her? Like, other people have come forward from Facebook who are also credentialed, but they don't get to be heard. Weird. But anyway, New York Times had a great take on this, and I like this particularly. If you can scroll down a little bit so you can see the headline. Facebook is weaker than we knew. That's very interesting. Speaking now in the language of strategy and power politics, how can Facebook the Titan be toppled is the implication from this article. But literally they say Facebook's in trouble. Not financial trouble or legal trouble, or even senators yelling at Mark Zuckerberg trouble. What I'm talking about is a kind of slow, steady decline that anyone who's ever seen a dying company up close can recognize. Notice they're trying to introduce a sort of pall over Facebook. You know, the most successful company in all of human history. No company has ever had as many customers as Facebook has had, and yet it's a dying company.
Yeah, and it's also an expression of the fact, maybe, that it's not accepted as part of the, shall we say, Silicon Valley intellectual vanguard anymore.
Exactly.
It's a seismic moment.
Yes.
For San Francisco.
And notice how, like, all of these, again, all the major sort of power players when it comes to setting the intellectual tenure, like the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, New York Times, they've all formed ranks against Facebook and are now pouring fire into them. Using militaristic language. You know, they say it's a cloud of existential dread that hangs over an organization whose best days are behind it. And how do you know? Whose opinion is this?
That's almost come out of nowhere, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We've just made this up. We're just saying it. This is like internet blood sports, but for Silicon Valley. But anyway, so the point is this momentum is clearly being astroturfed. We go to the Wall Street Journal. This Facebook whistleblower's testimony builds momentum for tougher tech laws. So you can see how the sort of left-wing elite class in America are all rallying around, gathering the troops and saying, right, well, we've got to constantly start attacking Facebook now. And this is how it's done. It can't have been done by James O'Keefe or any, what I guess we'll call right-wing whistleblowers. Now it has to be done through left-wing means. But yeah, so they just pour onto this even more. And so this gives us some of the responses from the lawmakers. One said, so Facebook did actually give a response to this and said, one thing we agree on, it's time to create standard rules for the internet. Instead of expecting the industry to make societal decisions that belong to legislators, it's time for Congress to act. So Facebook aren't even necessarily resisting this, but so Senator John Thune, who's a Republican, said, I would simply say, let's get to work. We've got some things we can do here when talking about algorithm transparency. And Amy Klobuchar said, well, there are lobbyists around every single corner of this building that have been hired by the tech industry. Facebook and other big companies are throwing a bunch of money around this town and people listen to them. So they are all the entire structure is wide awake now and is talking about this. And so this whistleblower, I find it interesting how she's got a fundraiser that's been raised by Whistleblower Aid. Again, they didn't do this for any of the right-wing fundraisers, whistleblowers. No. None of this happened. It's all just for this particular one because of, I'm assuming, a series of connections and political alignments that she has. But 37 grand out of 100 grand they've raised so far. We need your support to make sure she's got the backup she needs as she stands up to speak the truth. Everyone appears to be on her side.
Yeah, and it's effectively her word against the entire Facebook corporation.
Yeah,
and the very fact that, well, everyone has pivoted to her side on what is at present completely arbitrary grounds is extremely revealing. Yeah,
because I mean, there's more than one way to read the leaked information that Facebook put out. Well, not they didn't put out, that she put out. Because I mean, for a quarter or so of women, your girls, Instagram is bad for them, but for 75%, it's either neutral or positive. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, throw those quarter under the bus or anything, but there are multiple ways of reading this, and it depends on how you're trying to, what result you're trying to get out of it. So the question is, why is she doing this? Now, it's probably not just money. She says that she's doing it because she lost a friend to misinformation. Now, this wasn't misinformation about Russia interfering with the elections. It wasn't misinformation gotten by any Democrat source. No, this was right-wing misinformation. All of this, you don't even hear the terms left-wing misinformation out of these people.
Of course not.
No, of course not. As if the left-wing has never said something untrue. But anyway, she claims that she doesn't hate Facebook. She loves Facebook and wants to save it. And saving it means giving her and her... I think Vanguard is the best term for it, control over Facebook's editorial policies. She says that a family friend was hired to help her with her daily tasks after she became ill, but their relationship deteriorated as he became obsessed with online forums touting conspiracy theories about dark forces manipulating politics. Not Koch brothers money or anything like that. No. Of course, it's George Soros money. As if the left wing and right wing don't have mirror image conspiracy theories at this point. But she says, it was a really important friendship, and then I lost him. The former friend has apparently fell into, what was it she said? QAnon and white nationalism. QAnon and white nationalism are both banned from Facebook. So I don't know how he fell into this. But I mean, maybe it was before it was banned, I suppose.
When was it banned?
Sorry, the world of the occult and white nationalism, she says, yeah. It was a couple of years ago. It was not recent that this was banned. At least not recent on a sort of political commentary timeline. But anyway, and so you can see this feeding into the left-wing media ecosphere. If we can go to the next one, see Salon.com, Amanda Marcotte, Facebook whistleblower exposes dark reality. Right-wing disinformation is popular and profitable. And this is part of an ongoing media narrative that has been spun around Facebook because, again, Facebook has been remarkably lenient with the kind of content that it allows, as in conservatives are allowed to use Facebook. That's the problem that they have. The mere fact that disinfo is out there already circulating is in itself a form of social permission. If other people are lying to advance their political goals, Facebook users can believe that it's okay to engage with and promote the lie as well. Or it could be that they don't believe their lies and they just have different interpretations of the same events. But anyway, this, again, like I was saying, if you go to the next one, John, is part of a very long and storied history of them complaining that right-wing people are doing very well on Facebook, because Facebook is full of boomers. Boomers tend to be more conservative than millennials and Generation Z. And this one's from March 2021, where they're complaining that the right-wing misinformation on Facebook is more engaging than its left-wing counterpart. Research finds.
It's funny that they think the engagement has less to do with whether there might actually be substance to why they're being attracted to certain ideas, and more to do with Facebook's algorithm.
Yeah. But yes, it's basically an admission that the left can't meme. From research.
Yeah.
And there's, sorry, I realise we're running a little low on time. Let's carry on. So, Vanity Fair, Facebook is now the social media home of the right. They wish, you absolutely wish that was the case. But this is because basically Mark Zuckerberg didn't want to be the police of information online. This was from 2020, this one. Anyway, so what this was about is that on Twitter, Jack Dorsey had decided to start labeling Trump's most dangerous posts as glorifying violence and fact-checking them, whereas Zuckerberg decided to go in the opposite direction, conceding that he is not the arbiter of free speech, and even going as far as to have a call with Trump on himself to talk about Facebook's stance. Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but Mark Zuckerberg has done the morally correct thing here.
Yeah.
He's not the arbiter of free speech.
Yeah, and he's not acting in contempt of the US Constitution, which arguably Twitter does directly.
That's a great point. Moving on, the sort of popular viral trash sites like Mashable. Oh, Facebook is the right-wing social network now. The right-wing's just taken over Facebook. The transformation of Facebook is complete. So moving on from this, you can see that in 2020, Politico, again, the media narratives, they're constant. The right wing has a massive advantage on Facebook. Again, this just comes back to the left can't meme, and so they're upset by this. And this has been going on since 2018 at the very least, where you see Media Matters claiming that Facebook is a right-wing propaganda machine. Okay, but by that standard, every other social media network is a left-wing propaganda machine. And no one cares. They don't care because they're left-wingers, obviously. And so this basically drills down to why. Why is Facebook the right-wing propaganda machine? And it's because Mark Zuckerberg is actually better on free speech than most people would want to give him credit for. In 2019, he spoke at Georgetown University about the importance of protecting free expression, and he underscored his belief that giving everyone a voice empowers the powerless and pushes society to be better over time, and that's basically his core belief. And he does seem to have stood on this. The New York Times described him as, quote, defiant. We can go to the next one. Senator Warren accused him of, Elizabeth Warren accused him of being a disinformation for profit machine, which was a bit harsh, I think, all things considered. But yeah, anyway, so Zuckerberg has been saying this for quite some time, and he's got quite a good statement here. People having the power to express themselves at scale is a new kind of force in the world, a fifth estate alongside the other power structures of society. The journey towards greater progress requires confronting ideas that challenge us. And he's here today and that day because he believes that we must continue to stand for free expression. Now, that's a good point. The fifth estate alongside the other power structures of society. Because the fourth estate, the media, are clearly not happy about this.
No.
And that's what they're doing.
And ironically, you could actually say this is the closest thing to like a Habermasian platform for communicative discourse that there has ever been in cyberspace. And yet,
absolutely. It couldn't... you couldn't make the point more clearly that this is the media being concerned that the power of their narratives is being challenged by grassroots use of the internet. And they hate it. And it's Facebook that is actually facilitating this, believe it or not. Now, again, that is not to say that Facebook hasn't censored or isn't guilty of doing this. As we know, that they deplatformed Tommy Robinson unjustly, I think, because of a lie. They deplatformed Alex Jones, which I don't really think was justified either, but probably more justified than Voldemort. And of course, they deplatformed Trump all in one day, and that still wasn't good enough according to the Carnegie Foundation. But so it's not to say that Facebook has not been guilty in its own way of doing this. But I don't think really this comes from Mark Zuckerberg's intuitions or motivations. It seems that this is because of outside pressure from, you can see that the media maelstrom operating around him. I mean, like, after Zuckerberg gave his 2019 defense of free speech, it was like, oh, Facebook and the free speech excuse. Various articles like this at the time. And so it was like, right. But again, I really want to hammer this point home. Zuckerberg has actually defended free speech on many occasions and in many unpopular ways. And the one I keep coming back to is in 2018, where he didn't want to take Holocaust denial off of Facebook. Now, that's a remarkable hill to die on. Zuckerberg himself is Jewish, and so he, I guess, had a bit of leniency on this because, he was like, well, look, I'm Jewish and I don't think we should get rid of it. Because in his words, people have sincere convictions, whether they're right or wrong. And so he says, I think that I don't believe our platform should take things down because I think there are things that different people get wrong. He doesn't support Holocaust denial. He doesn't believe Holocaust denial, but he does think that people with sincere convictions should be allowed to say things that are wrong. Because then if the alternative, as much as you don't like it, is entering into this kind of scientific, technocratic, managerial frame of the internet where you're not even allowed to be wrong.
Yeah.
And that's awful.
Yeah.
He did end up caving on this a couple of years later, and eventually, because basically of all the pressure groups, I think, and essentially had to get rid of QAnon. It was in 2020 that got rid of QAnon and Holocaust denial and all of that sort of stuff. And so we end now, I guess, where we are now with Facebook basically being slowly but surely eaten up by left-wing activists and left-wing control. And so that means that the Daily Wire is probably going to see its reach limited substantially because that's their main concern. Outlets like the Daily Wire, Fox News are dominating Facebook because that's where the boomers are and that's what they want to see. It's not that Facebook is some sort of right-wing, propaganda platform. It's that it's the people using it make it what it is.
Yeah, and the longer the purge goes on, the more these right-wing fanatics, as they're being ostracised as, are going to mobilise on social media and be, well, shall we say, unfairly castigated again.
Yeah. And it's because of the left-wing intolerance to the existence of right-wing ideas. All they can do is pathologise them as being misinformation because they don't come to the same conclusions as left-wingers.
It's a heresy charge, in effect.
Yes, yeah. That's exactly it. It is a charge of heresy. That's exactly it. Right, so tell me about Sparta Prague. Sparta
Prague, yes. Now this is actually quite alarming, but nonetheless extremely revealing as well. Right. So last Thursday, Scottish champions Rangers faced off against Czech side Sparta Prague in their second Europa League group fixture. And in making use of a loophole that allowed Sparta, the home team, to get around a stadium ban enforced by UEFA for reasons I'll explain in a minute, the Czech side offered free admission to children from local schools aged between 6 and 14, accompanied, of course, by their parents. And this was a proposal that was approved by UEFA before the match, so it's all legit. But during the match, it was being widely reported that Finnish midfielder Glenn Kamara was being jeered by the young Sparta Prague supporters every time he touched the ball. And if we scroll down a little bit on this article... Yeah, so he was targeted by a crowd of children in Prague on Thursday night.
Right.
And in effect, the media has been pretty ubiquitous in...
well, this was racist, clearly.
Yes. Yes.
There's a bunch of racist children.
A bunch of racist children. And, well, quite frankly, as we're going to see, this is maybe slight overreach. And if
imagine my shock.
Yes. And if we get the video up now... I think we'll see. Okay, So just to disambiguate what's going on here.
Yeah.
The first part of that is quite simply the fans acting in kind of, you could say, either support for Sparta Prague or the contempt for the Rangers supporters for taking the knee. And as we know, whenever someone does such a thing, the UK media essentially, or the sports media in particular, immediately renders it as an endorsement of racism of the very, very worst kind. And needless to say, this is egregious. And that's the second part is a little bit more open to interpretation. But it's.
I mean, I didn't hear them shouting the N-word.
No, they're hurling abuse at camera, but you can hear quite clearly if you hear the uncensored version. There's no racial language that is being used. But the reason that this is being stirred up as a racial incident is because of the context leading up to this.
Right.
But first, I think it might actually be funny to see how Sparta Prague officially actually responded to the accusations that the kids that they had let into the stadium were acting explicitly racist. So if we get this up from the Daily Record. Yep.
Or is there another video here?
Oh, I can just read it out.
Oh, yeah, go.
So this is a quote from Sparta Prague themselves. It is absolutely unbelievable that after a match we have had to watch innocent children being attacked and face unfounded accusations of racism. Insulting children on the internet and in the media is unacceptable, desperate and ridiculous. Stop attacking our children. Our club will proudly defend our children, our future and our pride. Slandering children on the internet is extremely cowardly. We are seeing unprecedented xenophobic statements against the Czech Republic, its citizens and even its children on social media. You are describing the behaviour of children incorrectly, arrogating to yourself the right to judge the expression of emotions of 6-year-old children who have no idea what racism is. It's an impertinence. Needless to say, they're not holding back.
I love that it's an impertinence.
Yeah, it's an impertinence.
That's a great statement.
I mean, I've honestly never come across such a you could say a based response from a football club on this matter. That's not to say that racism's completely absent here.
Sure.
But let's not.
Kids.
This is basically being reported as a case of almost like a group collectivized effort by children who have been coerced to do this in some way. I don't know. But to put this in the context of why this has been received as racist, the stadium ban was implemented by UEFA in the first place. It was implemented in virtue of Sparta being unable to prevent Monaco's, and I'm sorry if I pronounce his name wrong, Aurelien Tchouameni from being subject to monkey gestures during the previous Europa League fixture against Monaco. Needless to say, that's awful.
Yeah.
But the context underwriting the UK media's reaction goes back further, and this is where Rangers come into this. Last season, on March the 18th, when Rangers played Sparta's rival Slavia Prague in the round of 16, there was another incident involving Glenn Kamara and Andrei Kajula.
So is this going to be these kids know this history and don't like this individual player?
Yeah, in effect, yes. And because of that, they must be expressing contempt because they're racist.
Yeah, because they're yelling, in the video, you can hear them yelling his name particularly. Because
Yes.
there were other black players on the pitch. They weren't yelling at them. They were yelling at this one guy.
Yeah, right. But if we take a look at the Guardian coverage of this particular matter, defender found guilty of racist abuse at Ibrox, Kamara banned for 3 games for assaulting Kadela. So let's see what this is all about. So he was reported to have called Kamara, again, there's no nice way of putting this, a monkey during the match. And having been found guilty of this offence by UEFA, he was subsequently banned for 10 matches. Kadela has continued to deny making the remark ever since. But the media has in effect arrived at the non sequitur that the jeering from the Sparta Prague supporters, in short, is assumed to be related to this incident in March and thus an expression of contempt for the charge and by extension solidarity with the rival player who has been charged as racist.
Right. So do we not have any? We don't have any proof that he called him a monkey. Is that? It's just an allegation, is it?
Well, it was reported by the Rangers players,
right?
And I imagine there must have been some lip reading involved as well.
Okay.
I mean, it's the evidence seems pretty strong when you consider the weight of the testimonies. I've got no reason to think that this did not happen. Mm-hmm. So it's on these grounds, in effect, this it's tracing it back to this incident and mixing this with the jeering with the children. The UK media has interpreted this jeering as racially motivated, but as I'm sure, at least I heard and you can hear, it seems like the level of the abuse is pretty low.
It seems personal. It doesn't seem like it's racial. It seems we're not like we hate black people. We hate you.
It's extremely I mean, I've been to 10 football matches in my life. There were some pretty like contemporaneous things that are said that don't actually mean anything in the spirit of competition.
Yeah.
That's not to say that some of the things are not awful, because they are, but nonetheless, to jump at a child's to jump on a child's utterance like this, I think is pretty low. And even though it does appear that there does seem to be a bit of a problem with Sparta's and Slavia Prague supporters in these cases, they are absolutely right to in effect call the media out and call Rangers out for saying that, look, you've jumped on this without even having the extensive knowledge to launch such a charge. And
what I find, if we can just go quickly back to their response, right? I find this really, really interesting because their response is deeply moral. And that's normally not the kind of response you get. Like you said, it's a deeply based response. Their response is based completely on the moral intuitions to defend their children. As they say, they're our future and our pride. Slandering children on the internet is extremely cowardly. My God, like you think you make honour charges against journos these days?
Yeah.
Of course it's cowardly. They're a bunch of cowards. They're the slimiest people on earth.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, of course. Like, yeah, it feels like I'm hearing something from the 16th century. You know? This is the kind of insult that I would have heard then. You know, they don't care about honour whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I find it very interesting. It's a deeply sort of moralistic response.
Yeah.
We just don't see anymore.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, could we be able to go back to the Metro article again, so we can actually see some of the responses from the UK media here? Yeah. If we just go down a bit, so up a little bit. Yeah, that's it. So The Athletic's Jordan Campbell, who was reporting on this on Twitter, reported that Camera is now being booed with every touch. Let's just make it perfectly clear that there were other black players on the pitch. They weren't booing him. I can't remember what the player's name is. That would in itself suggest that this is aimed at a particular individual, may not be a general contempt of someone in virtue of their race.
Yeah.
And BT Sports commentator and former Rangers midfielder Alex Ray said there's no two ways about it. He's being targeted by these kids. It's difficult to hear in this day and age, but this is the case. He's clearly being... I don't know where exactly the commentary box was. Maybe they were right next to that child. But from what we could hear, was there a massive chorus of chanting of anything?
No, it sounded localised. But okay, so there are a bunch of kids at a game who don't like Kamara because of an interaction he had that got a previous a footballer they obviously banned for 10 games. And so they're booing him and not the other black guy. So it's not the fact that he's black, it's the fact that they think he's an arsehole.
In effect, yes. Yeah. I mean, there may be some people who genuinely think he deserves this in virtue of his race.
Possibly.
But there is nothing conclusive to suggest that. And to jump to that conclusion off the back of,
it just goes
utterances by children, to leech onto that is...
It just goes to show you exactly the kind of mindset that the media are in, doesn't it?
No,
they want this. They want it to be racism.
They want this. They're finding cases of racism where there aren't. And in this particular case, there is more merit than others. But even so, I think the act of opportunism was pretty low. Yeah. I mean, do you listen to TalkSport all that much? I'm not sure if you are a man of sports.
I'm not a sports fan.
Not a sports fan.
I prefer to play rather than watch.
Yeah. If you tune in, I mean, pretty much all they talk about is racism. I wouldn't have a problem with this at all if they actually talked about it in the nuanced way that such an important issue deserves. But they quite literally still think, like many of them still think, that the narrative is with this post-racial idea of not judging people because of the colour of their skin. They don't seem to realise that this is all being kind of peddled with diversity as the end of it.
Yeah. But moreover, this is a great example, in fact. Like, it just goes to show you that any sort of public criticism or animus against an individual who happens to be black is then always conflated into being racism. Because, I mean, I don't doubt there are other players who are not black who have sections of the fans who dislike them.
Yeah.
There are bound to be. And, this guy is a jerk because for whatever reason. And so there are always going to be a section of the fans that boo this guy because of who he is and what he's done. And Kamara is in fact being treated like everyone else in that way.
Pretty much.
And yet, because he's black, that means he's not allowed to be booed by a bunch of kids.
You know, that's what it inadvertently means. Yeah. I mean, do you remember when Ashley Cole went from Arsenal to Chelsea? And there was
I do not.
You do not. Well, there was needless to say, Arsenal and Chelsea absolutely hate each other, and this was a massive. This is like the equivalent of crossing the Rubicon for Arsenal fans, right?
Right. Okay.
And he was basically absolutely hammered by the media for making a move which was perceived to have been entirely on monetary grounds. Like he was being called greedy, flash, all these sorts of things. Basically called a sleaze for allowing himself to be tapped up by the then Chelsea chief executive Peter Kenyon. And on the kickoff, which is a footballing podcast, which it was a special edition in response to. It was amidst the George Floyd fallout. They had somehow arrived at the conclusion the very reason that Ashley Cole was given this level of abuse was because he was black. It had nothing to do with the fact that he had gone from Arsenal to Chelsea.
Well, the fact that he was literally Benedict Arnold of the football team.
Yes.
I mean, and like you can understand... This. So I've never been a football fan, but if there's one thing you can see from the outside, it's that there are some very deep passions involved in this, and very long-held grudges involved in this. And so, like like the Benedict Arnold of football is going to get booed every time the opposing fans are watching him play. Obviously,
But they've made a race issue even out of this. I had honestly not heard a single racial utterance aimed at Ashley Cole in this entire measure.
And I bet they all cheered him when he was scoring for Chelsea or whatever it was, wasn't he? They were like, hey, Ashley Cole, he's our boy. Now he's gone to the others. Oh, no, we hate him now. Oh, you're a racist. That's not what this is.
No. But just to illustrate the change in focus and discourse at the moment, insofar as sport is concerned, there was something called the Rooney Rule, which was I think the FA were discussing or something like that. Which it was about the it was a means of attempting to give more managerial opportunities to different players of different ethnicities and
and class backgrounds.
Class background. They all hated it basically, but now they've decided that they like it. Perhaps we can cover this another time.
Yeah, we'll cover it another time. But okay, so just to summarise, then, this is probably nonsense.
Yes, and it's unashamed opportunism at the expense of people that aren't as of yet recognised legally as rational beings because they're children.
Yes. I mean, why is the media bullying a bunch of 6 to 14-year-olds?
Yeah, it's pretty low.
But it's unbelievable, isn't it? That's more important to them than the propriety about the way that they should treat children. They think, oh no, these children are racist, and therefore it's justified for us to use the collective power of the media to bully a bunch of kids. And so, like you were saying about the statement from the football side, appropriately moral, say, no, you're wrong for daring to treat children this way. Like, it would be totally irresponsible. I would never dream of publishing something attacking a bunch of children on our website. God.
No.
It would be totally wrong. Oh, these children are a bunch of communists. Well, okay, but they're kids. Like, we're not going to, we'll talk about, like, Carrie Simmons being communist, but we're not going to talk about a bunch of kids being communists, Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Speaking about communists, let's talk about the Conservative Party conference, because it turns out there were some commies there for some reason. Much conservatism. So Carrie Johnson, Boris Johnson's wife and not an elected politician or anyone of any note other than the fact that she sleeps with Boris Johnson, gave a speech there about extending gay rights. Is there a right that a gay person doesn't have that I have?
I can't.
They can get married. They can, live, get jobs.
And that equates to equal recognition, doesn't it?
I thought that we had the same rights, but apparently these rights need to be extended. So let's listen to a clip from Carrie's speech.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It is really fantastic to be here. Whether you are LGBT+ or an ally like me, we are all committed to equality and acceptance for everyone, whoever you are and whomever you love. There are still those that will tell you that being LGBT+ and a Tory is somehow incompatible. Well, looking around the room tonight, we can see that is blatantly untrue. The idea that your sexual orientation orientation or your gender identity should determine your politics is now as illogical as saying as your height or your hair colour should. Many of you here tonight have helped play a part in the journey our party has taken on gay rights. And we can now say with huge pride that it was a Conservative Prime Minister who delivered equal marriage in England and Wales. And I want you all to know that we now have a Prime Minister who is completely committed to protecting those gains and extending them further. But for all the progress we have made as a society, we know there is still a long way to go. The LGBT plus community still faces stigma, harassment and discrimination, with hate crime still a fact of life. I heard myself from the victim of such a crime at the Pride reception we held in Downing Street earlier this year, and I have to say I was moved to tears.
I did think he was going to do a Trudeau there.
Go on.
When she nearly tripped over the LGBT bit.
Nearly, but I mean, how conservative did that sound to you?
It's almost...
Sounds like a Labour Party conference speech,
yeah, I was just going to say that.
doesn't it?
It's you can't differentiate the two
We're
at
for
all.
equality, we're for progress, that's right, we're conservative.
She used exactly the same buzzwords as the Labour Party and all of, needless to say, all of the progressives.
Yeah, it's saturated in left-wing ideology. The fact that she's saying, well, your politics no longer determine your sexuality no longer determines your politics. Who said it did? Well, the left, when they try to create identity categories that are politicized along certain kinds of lines. They're deliberately trying to gain control of the gay voting bloc, the lesbian voting bloc, and they're trying to squeeze these all together in the acronym LGBT, which we can talk about in a minute. But so the whole thing there, like the progress, the equality, this is the language of the communist. That's what they're after. They think that there is a glorious future ahead of us that we can attain if only we level the playing field enough until everything is exactly the same. That is the opposite of conservatism, which is to protect and conserve, dare I say, those things we have inherited from the past, which were not the product of progress, they were the product of tradition. So the total opposite and subversion of the Conservative Party right there, from an unelected person who happens to be sleeping with the Prime Minister. Anyway, so where does LGBT come from? Because the first thing she says, they're saying you can't be LGBT and a Tory. It's like, well, I mean, it's like, what does it mean? Where does it come from? What is it? Well, as Wikipedia tells us, it's been in use since the 1990s. The initialism, as well as some of its common variants, functions as an umbrella term for sexuality and gender identity, and they link to a study as their first link there. So we can get to the next one. This is what they link to. The approaches to research and intersectionality perspectives on gender, LGBT, and racial ethnic identities. And in the abstract, they point out that intersectionality theories, or the recognition of multiple interlocking identities, defined by relative socio-cultural power and privilege, sounding very conservative this, isn't it?
Oh, very.
Constitute a vital step forward in research among multiple domains of inquiry. To provide common ground for this work, each paper in this special issue addresses the intersections of gender, lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender, and racial ethnic identities and related experiences. In this introduction, we provide an overview of the definitions, conceptualizations, etc., and they go into the history of it. And so where does this all come from? Well, this all comes from Kimberly Crenshaw. Do you know who she is?
No idea.
She is one of the prime movers of critical race theory, and she is the lady who coined the term intersectionality in her 1989 paper, quote, Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, a Black Feminist Critique of Anti-Discrimination Doctrine, Feminist Theory, and Anti-Racist Politics. Much conservatism.
Needless to say, this is the exact abstract universalism that aspires to, or at least justifies the dissolving of the institutions that conservatives wish to preserve, not defend them in virtue of progress.
Absolutely, and that's exactly right. Abstract universalism, which is exactly where we've arrived here. In contrast to concrete particularism, which is what the conservatives are supposed to be, preserving these demonstrable, unique institutions that are not universal, that are particular to our country. And so in this essay, right, I've read through it. In this essay, she maps through 3 legal cases in America that she feels that black women are entitled to a particular identity claim that is not recognized by the American legal system. This is the origin point of intersectionality. A black, and a capital B black, so a racial identitarian, a gender identitarian, and a communist trying to achieve, quote, equality by manipulation of US law has found its way into being LGBT and a Tory. They are not the same thing. They're contradictory things. You cannot be LGBT. But this is not the same as saying, can you be gay and a Tory? Because LGBT is an acronym, a sort of a Frankenstein's monster of an acronym. Because obviously L, G, and B are sexualities and T is a gender identity. Not the same thing. Why are they together? Doesn't make sense. Only makes sense if you're interested in coalition building, left-wing politics, which Kimberly Crenshaw is, and if you're intersectional. If you're not intersectional, you can't be LGBT. If you're a Tory, why are you intersectional? Because you're now critiquing the intersections of racial and gender hierarchies and trying to achieve equality. Is that what conservatives are about? I wouldn't have said so. But basically what she's saying is, if you can be an LGBT and a Tory, you can say, I'm a communist and a conservative at the same time. No, you can't. And so Pink News were thrilled with this, and Pink News being like a, leftist subversive rag, as you can imagine, they're thrilled with this. And if Pink News are thrilled with what's going on at the Conservative Party conference, you're doing something wrong. You're not being very conservative, right? So they say, in a speech at the Conservative Party conference, Pride drinks reception. Why would there be a pride? Pride is a sin, isn't it? Isn't pride a sin in the conservative worldview? I thought it was, there are 7 deadly sins, pride being one of them. Are you going to have a wrath conference next? Call me old-fashioned. Anyway, Carrie Johnson insisted that it was blatantly untrue and incompatible to be queer and a Tory. Johnson said her husband, the Prime Minister Boris, was completely committed to LGBT rights at the Pride event with partnership with Stonewall at the Midland Hotel. Do you know who Stonewall are?
I have some idea.
Radical left-wing gay activist group.